Hey there, welcome back to more library book ASMR. I'm Devan, in case we have not met before, and I'm glad you're here. Today we are going to be doing a little book review of this novel, Devan, Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And if you may have watched my blind date with a book video that I uploaded recently, you will know that I checked out this book from my local public library in a very mysterious and anonymous way. It was wrapped in brown paper, and its title was Hidden, and I chose it from a display of books that you could choose from to have a blind date with. So I knew it was a fantasy romance, but I did not know what it would be. So if you would like to see my initial reactions to the book when I unwrapped it and revealed it, you can check out that video. I will link to that. But I decided to come back and do another video with this book and give you my opinions of it after reading it, because I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. If you watched my initial reaction to this book, I was a little lukewarm about it because it seemed to have some of those typical romance novel cliches. It is an enemies to lovers story, and there are some themes of war in this book, which I wasn't sure if I was up for, just with my current state of mind and trying to keep myself more upbeat and positive in these dreary winter months. But I was excited about the fact that it's a story about two writers, and that there seem to be a lot of themes around that. And so I decided to give it a try. So I am going to tell you a little bit about what I thought of the setting and the characters and the plot. I will try not to give anything away or give any big spoilers in case you do want to read this book yourself. If you haven't read it, I think you will be safe to watch this. And I just thought it would be fun to do a little follow-up to my blind date with a book and let you know how the book date actually went and whether I will be going on a second date with this book, because it does have a sequel. So there is a chance for a second encounter. So, the other thing I wanted to say was that I didn't even realize until a few days ago that February is a Library Lovers Month. Library Lovers Month. So I thought, why not keep the library book content going this month? soft speaking because I do enjoy that for tingle purposes. And I could just tap on book spines all day long. This is one of my favorite ASMR triggers. So we will have lots of book sounds throughout this slow, gentle, rambly book review. Like all of my videos, I'm sure I will take my sweet time in doing this. So just relax, and if you're not at all interested in this book, you can just tune out the meaning of my words and let my voice and the nice tippity-tappity book sounds bring you some relaxation. So I will start by talking about the setting of this book, which I really enjoyed. It is set in a fictitious place that is set in kind of a early 20th century World War I kind of time period era, based on the technology and sort of the feel and the style and a lot of what's going on. And the story begins in a city. Eventually we move out into the country, and it has kind of a New York City feel to me, except that they seem to use a lot of British style language. Like everyone calls their grandmother Nan, and there are references to snogging instead of kissing. So it might also have a London type feel to it. I would be interested to hear what others who have read this think about the setting. But I did really enjoy the world that the author created for this. I liked the tone and the style of the writing and the characters and the setting and just sort of the general vibe of the novel, so that's always a good start. And in this fictitious land that this is taking place in, this is a place where in the past the land had been ruled by gods who are sort of parallel to the gods in ancient Greek mythology, but they are not those gods. They are gods unique to this universe. And history and legend tells that these gods were defeated by the humans, by the mortals, hundreds of years before this story takes place, and all of the gods were either defeated or forced into deep slumber underground. And I mean, come on, you know what that means. If you're a fantasy fan or a manga anime fan, just because someone is put into a deep sleep under the ground, or you think that they have been controlled or put into some kind of forever safekeeping, you know that that is never going to really last. So right before the timeline of this story begins, two of these ancient gods have reawoken and have gone to war with each other and are pulling the mortals into their battle. And so the city where we start out, the city of Oath, is still quite far away from the front lines of the battle, and so there are differing opinions among people as to whether the fighting really affects them or if it will ever reach their city. So that's one element and one tension in the plot. And so then we get to our two main characters, Iris and Roman, and they are both young. Iris is 18 and Roman is 19, and they are both rookie reporters at a city newspaper, and they are vying for a position as a full columnist at the paper. So that's where the whole rivals, enemies thing comes in. So there's a lot of, back and forth between them, a lot of banter and ribbing each other and them, being annoyed with each other and competing with each other and all of that typical enemies to lovers beginning phase kind of stuff. But it's well written, and I like both of the characters. They are relatable and likable people. And of course we have another typical romance novel device, which is that Roman is from a rich upper class family and that Iris is from a lower class, working class family. I feel like that is always the case in romance novels and movies. You have to have people from two different worlds, as it were. And the other crux of the plot here is that Iris's brother, Forrest, has enlisted and gone away to fight in the war for one of the gods. And so he has left Iris and her mother on their own, and this is very hard on Iris's mother and on her physical and mental health. And so Iris is kind of taking care of her mother and holding things together, and they haven't heard from her brother in 6 months, and they don't know where he is or if he's still alive. And that's kind of where we come in to the main action of this story. And I'll tell you a little bit more because the next little part of the plot is basically explained in the jacket blurb on the inner cover. And it gets to this pretty quickly in the book. That is that Iris begins writing letters to her brother Forrest, and I will mention that everyone in this book is writing on typewriters. So if you're a lover of typewriters, there's a lot of the plot in this book that has to do with typewriters, and I really enjoy that element of it. She is typing letters to her brother, and because she doesn't know where to send them, because she doesn't have an address for him, she slips one under the wardrobe in her bedroom, because that's something that she and her grandmother used to do, was leave notes for each other tucked under the wardrobe. And through some magical occurrence, the letter disappears from underneath her wardrobe. And she doesn't know where the letter has gone. And that's another element I should mention, is that because this world that we are in was once ruled by gods, there are still remnants of magic to be found, even though for the time period that it's set in, it is a modern contemporary city. Some of the buildings still have enchantments and magical qualities about them. So it's not entirely unusual for things like this to happen in this world. And so she takes comfort in the fact that her letters are going somewhere and continues to write them. And eventually she gets a reply back from someone who says, "This is not Forrest." And so she knows that someone else is receiving her letters and is able to send her replies, but she doesn't know who this person is. Well, one guess as to who it is who is receiving these letters. It is her rival, Roman. And that comes into play pretty early in the book. And so I don't think I'm giving anything away in telling you that. I think that's explained in most of the descriptions of this book. And it's funny that in my reveal video for this book, when I was just previewing it and reading the little blurb on the inner flap and learned that it was an enemies to lovers story, I made a reference to the movie You've Got Mail with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. In that film, Meg Ryan is the owner of a small independent bookstore, and Tom Hanks is part of the family who owns a big corporate chain of bookstores, sort of like a Barnes & Noble type thing. And one of his stores comes into the neighborhood where Meg Ryan's store is and starts stealing all her business and being really aggressive about taking her customers. And so they have all these altercations, and Meg Ryan thinks that Tom Hanks is, this corporate scum, and, they have all this conflict. And then also, simultaneously, they are both emailing anonymously with someone that they met in an AOL chat room. This is very old school, I love it. And they are falling for each other, for this person that they have met online and are talking to in letters via email. And of course, they don't know that they are talking to each other. And the reason it made me smile that I had mentioned that is because in that movie, Tom Hanks realizes a lot sooner than Meg Ryan that they are talking to each other. And that is the same thing that happens in this book. That Roman knows from very early on that he is talking to Iris, but she does not know that it is him. So there's this whole, tension and conflict with him of should he tell her, and how should he tell her, and when should he tell her. And that was probably the part of the book that did get a bit tedious for me, in that traditional, stereotypical romance novel kind of way. That I was kind of like, come on, dude, just tell her. Like, be honest. Like, does any situation like this ever turn out better by not being honest? Like, the longer you wait, the harder it's gonna be. Like, just tell her the truth. So, eventually it all, comes out into the light. I won't give you any more details about that. And I won't give away the details of how exactly it is that they are connected and why their letters are reaching each other in this way, because that's one of the coolest parts of the book, in my opinion. But I just thought it was funny because, much like You've Got Mail, their letters are going back and forth to each other pretty instantaneously, almost as if they were texts or emails. And so I think it's very clever on the author's part in this book that even though she set this in a more retro, older time kind of setting, you still sort of have that dynamic of them being able to correspond with each other instantaneously via letter, as if you would have in a more modern romance novel where people are texting, etc. So I thought that was kind of cool, and for a contemporary reader who wouldn't have the patience for actual letter correspondence, this keeps things moving a little bit. So again, without giving too much away, Iris does eventually decide to go closer to where the fighting is happening to try to discover what's going on with her brother. And I won't give you all the details of that because that's a good part of the plot too. And then you get to meet a lot of good secondary characters who are in that part of the story. And I will say that the second part of the book does take place on the front lines of a battle. So there is violence and there is loss, and it's written in a very tender, very compassionate way. There's not a lot of gratuitous violence or graphic depictions or anything like that, but just be aware that those themes are here in this book. And there's a lot of themes around the idea of, not knowing what's going to happen and being very aware and alive in the life that you have and the time that you know that you do have. And so they do get together. It would be a pretty crummy romance novel if the two main characters didn't end up getting together. But there are quite a few surprise twists that happen right at the end of the book. So you don't quite get the typical happy ending that you usually get at the end of a romance novel, because there is a book 2 in this series, which is out now. It is called Ruthless Vows. Ruthless Vows. Ruthless Vows. Very dramatic. And it will pick up where this book left off and conclude the story of Iris and Roman. And so overall, just some thoughts on this book. It was a very quick read for me. I read it over the course of a weekend, and it did very much draw me into the story. I did read it in some big chunks because I was into the story and wanted to know what would happen next. And like I said, I did enjoy all the characters. The main characters and the secondary characters are very well developed, and I liked the different people that she brought into the story and into Iris's life. I liked that even though this was set in kind of, like I said, a World War I, early 1900s kind of setting, I liked that all the women in the book were in equal positions with the men, like as far as the military and at the newspaper, and in general, this was sort of like an old-time setting, but with more progressive views on gender, which I thought was kind of neat to see. And as far as a romance novel, this was very, very low on the steamy bedroom scene scale. Some romance novels have a lot of that sort of thing, have a lot of those steamy scenes, and this book really did not have that at all. It was very conservative in that way, and that was fine for me. I wasn't looking for a particularly scandalous read, but in case that plays into your preferences for romance novels, either way, I will say that. And it is a fantasy novel, but not a spectacularly fantastical novel, you know. We don't get a lot of details about the gods themselves in this first book. You get to hear some of the myths and the tales about them, but you don't really have any first-hand interactions with them, which I think is going to happen in the second book, it seems like. So I think the second book might be more fantastical than this one. That will be interesting to see. And I do like the way that the plot was woven, and I like the cliffhanger that they kind of are all left in at the end. I think she did a good job with that. And it does make me want to read the second book. So if this was a long series, if this was going to be like a 5 or 6 book series, I don't know if I loved it enough that I would invest in that. But since there's only one more book in the series, I think I will read it at some point. I'm not like dying to go out and get it right this second, but I will request it through interlibrary loan at some point if my library doesn't get it specifically, so that I can finish up the tale and see what happens to them and get to the happy ending, get to the actual happy ending, which I'm sure there will be at the end, because that's how these kind of books usually go. If not, it wouldn't be very satisfying, so I would be surprised if you do not get a happy ending at the end. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about this. Like I said, I do like both the male and female lead characters, and you get both of their points of view, which I like. There is a good bit of that romance novel tension, as I said, where she doesn't really know what's going on, and he's struggling with whether to tell her and that sort of thing. And it went on just about as long as I could tolerate. If there had been another, 20 or 30 pages of that, I think I would have gotten impatient, but I think the author did a good job of writing out that tension, but, bringing the truth out in a timely way in the plot, and there are some pretty dramatic parts within the plot. There are definitely some cliffhanger moments, like I said, and some heroism shown on the part of our characters. And overall, I did enjoy it. I would say I would give this book, I'm very picky about books, so my 5-star rating would be a stellar book. So I would probably give this like a 3.5, or maybe a 3 3/4 star, if I'm going to do it the old school Star Search way, like an upper 3 out of 5 rating, because I did enjoy the setting. The story did pull me in. I liked that both the main characters are writers, and writing is very central to the plot. The story kept me intrigued, and I did want to keep reading and know what was going to happen. And I liked the little bits of magic and fantasy in it. I actually kind of wish there had maybe been a bit more of that. And again, I just sense that may be coming in the second installment. And it's interesting, this woman, Rebecca Ross, seems to have a series of these duologies, which I had never heard of that word before, which surprised me. I never really thought of it. There are trilogies when there are 3 books, and what would you call it when there are 2 books? I was like, a biology? No, that word is already taken. So I guess it is a duology, that she has a couple other 2-book series like that, which is kind of a cool thing to do. So you don't have to cram it all into one book, but it also doesn't have to become this extensive, drawn-out thing. And it does say here on the cover, I read this in my blind date with a book video, no God, no creature, no war can come between them. Divine rivals. So, thank you for hanging out with me and listening to my thoughts about this novel. As far as a blind date with a book, I do think I will be going on a second date with this book. I do think I want to read the sequel. I want to read the second installment. So we will see. I'm certainly not deeply in love or anything like that, but it's worth a little more exploration, I think. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this review was because a few people had mentioned in the comments that they had read this book or had heard about it and were interested in it. So if you have read this, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments. And if you've read the second one yet, please let me know what you thought of it and if it was a good conclusion. And at any rate, this gave me something to read on a very cold and blustery weekend. The weather here has been very cold and windy. You might have been able to hear the wind in this video. And so it was a nice, cozy read. It was nice to curl up with a cup of tea and read it. That was another theme in this book. There was a lot of tea drinking going on in this book, which is another reason that it had kind of a British feel to me, because everyone was constantly drinking tea, like even in the newspaper office and that sort of thing. So I hope this little review was entertaining and relaxing and perhaps informative for you. Let me know what you think of the library book sounds and my commentary. I've done a few library book reviews before. If you would like to see more of that kind of content, let me know. But for now, take good care of yourself, rest well, and I'll see you again soon.